Good evening, America. Today we'll be having a discussion on the current and very pivotal election of 1912. Current issues in our country include an increased popularity and dependence on industry, workers' rights, unions, trusts, and monopolies, as well as foreign affairs. Participating in this discussion are political commentators from the conservative and liberal sides. Each will provide insight and beliefs on the various issues I've already listed. This discussion is very important due to America's descent into an ever-growing dependence on industry. Such a descent brings up many issues that must be discussed. In addition, commentators should also address what should be America's stance in foreign affairs. Okay, starting off, we have Jordan Montero. He will be giving us a liberal perspective on this election.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. And to my right will be Ian Allison, who will be giving us a conservative perspective on this election. No problem. Okay, first to be discussed will be the current state of America's economy. Now, as we all know, it's heavily industrialized, and that's becoming a large part of America. And Jordan, how will Wilson essentially meet this? How will he incorporate this into his policy?
Okay, well, as a supporter of the Democratic Party and candidate Wilson, it's our top priority to lower these tariffs. High tariffs are creating monopolies and hurting consumers, and so we'll replace the revenue lost by the lower tariff with a new federal income tax. And much like our opponent, Mr. Taft, we are in firm support of a federal income tax and would like to see that the 16th Amendment gets passed. We are also not in support of trusts and must put an end to them to stop these unfair trade practices. If Wilson is elected president, he will reintroduce real competition to the market. By destroying monopolistic economic trusts, he will bring new freedom.
Okay, thank you. Okay, same question to you, Mr. Allison. How will Taft essentially incorporate America's heavy use of industry in its economy?
Well, similar to Mr. Roosevelt, high tariffs on foreign goods are good in order to stimulate U.S. products. When we make these tariffs, the U.S. products will go up in profit substantially. Like Mr. Montero said earlier as well, we too are against trusts and plan to do this through trust busting, as well as what he said with the 16th Amendment. Essentially, big business is good, and we need to keep using this in order to have a good economy.
Thank you. Okay, so introducing our second question to the conservatives, how does your group feel about the progressive movement that is sweeping across the nation, and what should be allowed to happen and what should be stopped?
Well, Taft was a firm believer on trust busting, which is large in the progressive movement. However, he feels as if business leaders keep union and labor workers in subordination. Here to further this is Representative James Allison of the Taft administration.
So, the biggest concern that we have to look at is that when we allow progressivism to move too far forward, you allow the union and the union leaders to strive for a business model that isn't conducive to profit. The main goal and the key objective of any business is to make the largest profit margin that you can have available. In turn, they can pass on those profits onto their workers, thus allowing a certain amount of progress in the business field and allowing an advancement in technology, an advancement in work, and that motivation that workers need to really strive to do their personal best on a daily basis. If you allow those union workers to work too heavily, what you allow is a business model that isn't conducive to providing an environment that is conducive to stagnation and prevents workers from striving to produce the best possible work that they can on a daily basis.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Montero, your side did essentially the same question. What is your group's, essentially your plan or your opinion on this progressive movement? How far are you willing to take it? What changes does your group want to implement into this movement?
Okay, well, as you should all know, Wilson is one of the leading progressives, arguing for a stronger central government and fighting for antitrust legislation and labor rights. Now I'm going to leave it to Ms. Montero from the progressive side. She has a few words.
And something Roosevelt and Wilson have in common is a vision of an expanded role of the federal government in the economy and a reduced role for the Constitution. And like Wilson, Roosevelt was a critic and foe of big business, and also wants an income tax to take away the earnings of the rich. And since the Constitution forbids such a tax, perhaps the Constitution should be changed.
All right, thank you. Good. All right.
Okay, before I ask the final question, I'd like to thank Ms. Montero and Mr. Allison, who were guest speakers, and they gave us input on essentially the question I asked previously. Okay, final question, Ms. Montero, starting with you. What type of foreign policy or position should America take? In what ways are your positions better than the others?
Okay, so in contradiction to Taft and Roosevelt, who believe that it is America's duty to spread democracy throughout the world, Wilson believes that all people throughout the world should have the right to self-determination, and that every country should have the right to choose their own governments. We must not try to spread democracy, but instead, we need to protect democracy.
Thank you. Okay, so essentially, Mr. Allison, same question to you. What type of foreign policy does your party want to pursue and why?
Well, while America should implement foreign trade, we should implement tariffs to prevent citizens from buying these products, further allowing us to have U.S. products being sold, further using our economy and stimulating the people in our country. Taft's goals were essentially world peace in regards to anything other than trade. He believed that international arbitration between adversarial nations could be utilized as the best means to avoid conflict. This is a logical extension of his boundless faith in the rule of law as in progressive, and it therefore even superseded the U.S. nationalism as embodied in the Constitution.
Okay, thank you. So that's all for this evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today you've seen essentially both sides' opinions on the current issues that. Okay, to wrap up tonight's show, essentially we have closing statements on both sides. Mr. Allison.
While the Grand Old Party may be old, it's still popping. Keep that in mind.
Okay, thank you. And yours?
Now, it's just me, or just having the first and last name start with a W, not mean Woodrow Wilson is an automatic win.
Wow. Okay. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, you've witnessed essentially a discussion about the policies and opinions on both sides. Now, do keep that in mind as elections do come up. This rec table.
Thank you. Good night.